Hey everyone, welcome to part 20 of my fist only, no armor, no deaths, no ranged weapons playthrough of Demon Souls. I've just put on the poison resistance ring to help with dealing with poison, as poison's all over the next area and there's lots of enemies to poison you there too. I'm also sending items to storage to lighten my item burden, which I previously said and thought really mattered to how fast I could move and how fast I could roll, but thanks to a commenter on my previous video, I now know that that was all a waste of time, because apparently how fast you can move in the game is completely dependent on your equipment burden, not your item burden. So in other words, your equipment affects how fast you can move, and your items affect nothing really apart from how many items you can carry. So it's probably still a good idea for me to have been sending them off to storage, since I don't need any of those items in this playthrough, but it really wasn't as essential as I thought it was. But I can't change it because I've already completed this playthrough. I'm just narrating this after the fact, so you'll still see me doing it over and over and over for the rest of this run. And speaking of this run, my biggest concern here was not the poison so much. I have the poison resistance ring, so by wearing that, what that means is I can stand in the swamp for a longer period of time before I actually get poisoned. And I also have some noble lotuses for curing poison, so I wasn't too concerned about the poison side of this area. The biggest concern I had when I came here was how slow I would move through the swamp, and also the fact that without having the sodden ring on, I don't have the sodden ring, it means I can't roll whilst standing in the swamp. In other words, I knew when I came here that there was no way I could engage any enemy while standing in this swamp, because I would not be able to roll behind them. And because it's an armorless and shieldless run, it means I've got no ability to block any enemy that comes at me. I'm only using the Adjudicator shield here to heal for its passive healing benefits, but I'm not allowing myself to use any kind of armor or shields in this run at all during combat, which basically means as long as I'm in the swamp and I get stuck engaged with an enemy, I have to try to outrun that enemy or get to land and engage them on land. You can get the Sodden Ring in Upper Latria, but you can only get it in a Black World tendency. For that you need to die, and this is a no death run. So even if I had done Upper Latria by this point, which I haven't yet, but had I done Upper Latria by this point, I still wouldn't have been able to get the Sodden Ring anyway. So I always knew that I was going to be doing the Swamp of Sorrow without the Sodden Ring. I had no choice. But as soon as I started wading through this swamp, I really didn't mind the fact that I was missing the extra movement speed that it gives you. I really didn't feel like I was going that slow. I hadn't tried to outrun anything by this stage though, but I still felt like I was moving reasonably fast, and I wasn't terribly worried about that. I think the main thing that you miss without the Sodden Ring is the ability to roll. So ideally I wanted to fight everything on land, but as soon as I saw there was a giant troll up there, I really wanted to fight these little guys away from him, and that meant fighting them in the swamp. I mean, I probably could have lured them to another little piece of land somewhere, but I thought I had enough health to deal with these guys even if I couldn't roll away from their attacks. But this was basically me testing the water, so to speak, testing the poisoned water. Alright, and now it was time to take on the giant on the land. Here I spotted the Black Phantom in the distance, which I believe is called the Meat Cleaver Black Phantom. I don't think there was a Black Phantom in the game up to this point that I hadn't beaten by dodging their attacks by rolling behind them, so I knew I was probably going to be exterminated by this Black Phantom if I had to fight the Black Phantom in the swamp. I basically wouldn't have had a chance. So what I'm doing here is trying to clear some of these enemies away, since they messed with me a bit during my fight with the minions a moment ago, and try to create a path that I could run through without worrying about other enemies, in the hope that I could outrun the Black Phantom from wherever the Black Phantom would see me to this land here where the troll was. That's where I wanted to fight the Black Phantom, on that land, and nowhere else basically. So what I'm doing here is I'm thinking about and planning my strategy for luring the Black Phantom over to this land area. At least my plan had been to clear a path, but for every one of these jelly things that I killed, there just seemed to be more and more, and look at my health. They were just becoming such a hassle that I thought I was probably better off to try and run around them, try and avoid them, because yeah, there just seemed to be too many of them. So I pretty much gave up on that idea and thought I'll just run around them, and I don't know, maybe they can hurt the Black Phantom. They can't, I don't think. But I thought maybe they could. So yeah, I gave up on trying to kill them. I thought, alright, it was time to try and lure the Black Phantom over to this land. Actually, when I think about how I was feeling at this point, I think this was the most concerned I'd been in the entire game. I was pretty sure that this Black Phantom could one or two shot me, and I wasn't even sure if I could outrun the Black Phantom in the swamp. I really did consider just ignoring the Black Phantom, since she's out there and that's not the direction I need to be going. But I am trying to do as much of the game as I possibly could remember to do in my second run. So yeah, here we go. Oh, and here she falls into the fire, and I was really happy about that, and then I was really bummed to see that it made no difference. Here I knew if she hit me again, I would die, but I also knew if I healed up, it would take 3 hits with that weapon to kill me. So I was no longer concerned about this Black Phantom. Having lured her over to the land, she was actually quite easy to beat in the end. So now I was free to run out here and collect all of the goodies. Right now I'm poisoned, but it's barely making any difference to me at all, thanks to the double stacked passive healing of the Regenerator Ring and the Adjudicator Shield. So I was right, between the Poison Resistance Ring and Regeneration of Vitality, being poisoned here really wasn't an issue. The only issue without the Sodden Ring is the inability to roll, but as it turned out, all you have to do is lure enemies to the land, and that doesn't matter either. I remember before I came to this area, I was a little apprehensive about finding my way around. It was kind of in my mind a little bit like the Prison of Hope, in that the first time I did this, it was quite confusing. But for some reason, when I came to it the second time around, I just didn't feel confused here at all. I pretty much felt like I knew exactly where I was going. I didn't know what any of these items were, though. I had no idea. Total guesswork, and it was a surprise to me with each one I picked up. But apart from that, I did have a really good idea as to where I was going, where the boss was, and yeah, I felt pretty comfortable in this area, which is totally surprised me. In my first playthrough, this area was scary, and yeah, I felt very confused in it, just like I did in Prison of Hope. Alright, in this second area, I had two choices. One, I could hook straight across the swamp on the right, or I could go up and collect all of the items along the scaffolding on the left. Since I'm trying to complete as much of the game as possible, I decided I would do the scaffolding on the left, but I was a little worried about it because I also knew there were enemies along it that could knock me off, and if I fell off this scaffolding, it was possible when I was up high enough that it could kill me. Also, you'll notice I put fire on my claws there by using pine resin. That was me testing out whether you could put pine resin on the claws because I didn't know, and I knew that the boss in this area was weak to fire. I'd forgotten to use fire on Leechmonger, even though I knew Leechmonger was weak to fire as well. So I just wanted to test whether or not pine resin worked on the claws here. So I wasted a pine resin to do it, but yeah, that's why I did that there. When I first started this run though, I wasn't sure I would use any items apart from grass, but I decided once I got the claws that I'd be willing to use pine resin. Still, I'm not willing to use any ranged items, so that's still off the table. But pine resin, yeah, I thought that can be on the table. completely forgot to put my adjudicator shield away there. Didn't block with it at all, but yeah, completely forgot to put it away. Oops. There we go, finally remembered. And boy oh boy are these giant mosquito things an absolute pain in the ass when you're using fists. It's so difficult to hit them using fists. These guys are annoying too. In fact, anything that has spear-like thrusts in this game is the real boss to me. All spear thrusting enemies are my nemesis. So I was up high enough to fall to my death there, but it really wasn't that bad. The enemies really weren't too bad there. Not as bad as I'd expected it to be anyway. There's some lone fire spear wielding dude out there. I don't think he's guarding any item. I couldn't see an item. He's just kind of randomly just hanging out there in the swamp by himself. Here I could also see another item, but the closer I got, I could see the silhouettes of a bunch of enemies. It looked like a very small patch of land, but they looked like giants, and I knew that there was no way I could fight a giant in the swamp, and a very small piece of land, there'd be nowhere to go either. So yeah, I decided against that item. I don't know what that item was, but I was never going to get it without dying, that's for sure. So yeah, I didn't go in that direction. I remembered there was a bunch of these slugs that I was going to have to fight, so I thought I'd just practice on those guys there. But as my health got lower and I saw a bunch of them slithering towards me, yeah, I thought, no, I'll come back to that. As soon as I approached this item, I remembered this little outcrop of slugs and that there's basically a nest of slugs hanging above it. And when you knock it down, there's a weapon for you. So I knew I was coming back to this area again, and that also reminded me that I had to go up and find that nest. See that green glow in the distance? That's an enemy. I could barely remember who he was, but I knew he was an enemy with some kind of poison magic. And I remembered he had killed me in my very first playthrough, him and the two giant trolls that are his bodyguards. So I turned around and I thought I better clear this area here of slugs just so I have some room to back off from fighting them. But honestly, I couldn't remember what his magic powers were. I just knew they were a pain in the ass and they were dangerous. And I was very nervous at this point because I knew I somehow had to separate the giants from him. But from memory, I don't think I was able to even do that in my first playthrough, and I ended up having to fight all of them. And even then, I was fighting all of them from a distance with magic. So if that was hard, then fighting all of them up close with melee was going to be, I don't know, it was going to be the death of me maybe. So yeah, I was very, very, very apprehensive at this point. I now know he's called the Depraved One Shaman, and that the bodyguards with him are giant depraved ones. But I didn't know that at the time, and I didn't know what he was called, and I didn't know what he could do. I just knew he had magic, and I knew he was not to be treated lightly. And not to forget, the whole area here is swamp. The only place I could fight them was this thin strip of land leading straight to them. But since this video is already over the 20-minute mark, I'll show you that fight at the start of part 21. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you there.